Welcome back to NY Flight Jets Talk. This stream, we are joined by host of Just Saying It, Mr. Cole Thompson. Cole, how are you doing today?
Connor, man, you got me excited knowing that you listen to the Jake Asman show. Apparently, my takes go off over there. Good, bad, and different. Don't really care, but I'm so glad you reached out to me, man. I'm excited to be on with you, talking Jets. Love talking about the Jets. What we're doing at pick number 10, baby.
First time on the show, hopefully not the last. I'd just like to let you know
Ah.
you are one of the favorites in the Jake Asman realm. We already got NY Jets superfan here. What's up, boys? Go Jets.
Hey, what's
Love
up,
to
NY Jets super fan?
Love to see it. All right, so you see us sitting at pick 10. We
Yep.
obviously know the guys that we're going to probably look at. I mean, you have Fawaga, Fashanu. I think the chances of Alt being there are very slim. Do you think we can go wide receiver? Would you rule out the possibility of maybe an Odunze, Neighbors, maybe even Bowers type of guy being selected?
So Bowers is a little interesting. No, I don't think that wide receiver is out of the realm of possibility at all whatsoever. You are trying to realize that this is a year where everything has to click offensively, especially if you're Robert Saleh, knowing that this is probably one of, if not the last season of Aaron Rodgers. You got to add weapons, you got to add offensive line, you got to add protection. All that's going to be figured out through free agency leading up to the draft, which could solve one of your problems. If you go out and you spend a lot of money on, say, Tyron Smith from the Dallas Cowboys, maybe your attention goes more so towards wide receiver at pick 10. And there's a multitude of receivers that maybe you don't feel comfortable taking at 10, but you'd be okay trading down a few spots, letting someone else move up, and then you make the selection there, get a little bit more draft capital in return. But this was an offense that was anemic when it came to passing and weapons outside of Garrett Wilson last year. You're hooked on the contract with Alan Lazard for another 2 seasons. Really, one if you include what the buyout would be with the dead cap and salary in salary cap space. So I think that when you look right now, wide receiver is not off the board. It wouldn't be number one on my board. Offensive tackle would be number one. Case in point, the last thing you want to do is have a 41-year-old quarterback be injured at the opening drive, and then you're right back at square one. But wide receiver is a good need. Here's the good news, though, Connor. This is a very good draft class to where if you don't get one of the premier players at, say, 10 or in a trade down, that doesn't take you out of the realm of possibility of still landing a great name on day 2, whether it be in the 3rd round, whether you find a way to recoup some draft losses to be able to move up and get the player in the 2nd round. There is going to be talent at the wide receiver, tight end position, even offensive tackle a little bit to where you would feel cautiously optimistic going in if you pass on a player at 10.
I agree. I really like Tyron Smith. I know he's a little older, but I think he's someone to definitely keep your eye on. If we were to sign Tyron Smith, personally, I'd pass on the O-line. I'd personally select Odunze. I think Odunze is one of the top receivers in this class. I'm a big fan of Neighbors. Only thing that scares me is he's 6 foot. I mean, not too small, but he's not big. I mean, you look at Odunze, he's 6'4", 6'5", and just a great overall receiver. But could you see us maybe if we signed Tyron Smith still selecting Fashanu or Fawaga?
Yeah, I think you have to. I think you have to look at everything right here, Connor, and that's more so what is the depth of the offensive line? What are you going to bring back? Are you going to maybe re-sign a Mekhi Becton on a 1-year deal to where he'd be here and you just move to right tackle? What's your game plan for a guy like AVT? Do you want him to play inside at guard? Do you feel more comfortable with him outside at right tackle? What are those determining factors with Joe Douglas that are going to allow him to kind of build his draft and build his board that leads to the number 10 pick? There's also the realm of where potentially you trade down. You lose the 2nd round pick last year to acquire, Aaron Rodgers. So now it comes down to you gaining a 2nd round pick. Do you move maybe down, say, I don't know, 18, 19? The Rams really want to move up and they want to get a premier wide receiver, or they want to go ahead and add in a defensive end, or they want to go ahead and get their quarterback of the future, and JJ McCarthy is too enticing to let fall into their ranks. Do then maybe you pivot towards a Tyler Guyton from Oklahoma or a Patrick Paul from Houston? Or is one of those the kind of conversation you're looking at?
Interesting. I like that. NY Jets Superfan says I think there's a better chance that we get Bakhtiari instead of Tyron Smith. Yeah, but like Bakhtiari, I don't think he'd play on the MetLife turf.
I don't think he would. I mean, well, for starters, he would have to get released from his contract in Green Bay. So that'd be number one. Are they going to release him from the current deal that he's on? And
Probably.
so, how much would you be willing to? I mean, how much of an impact will Aaron be in bringing him over? That's another big deal. Is Aaron going to allow him as a player who's coming off of injury at a place that's known for causing injury? I mean, like perfect case in point. CJ Stroud misses 2 games because of a concussion because he says the turf is too hard when he hits his head. The recoil ended up actually causing the concussion, not the hit itself. Is that an area where maybe Bakhtiari, when he looks at it from free agency standpoint, would even attest to even consider on the radar? Like those are things that really change it. And it also depends on where you are in your career. Like Smith, he's made a lot of money. He's a 6-time All-Pro. You know that he would be a staple at left tackle for at least a year. Do you feel more confident after that?
I agree. Our boy Allen. Cole laughs at my Hawkeyes.
You're just talking to him a minute ago.
Does Roman Wilson and Christian Haynes' great Senior Bowls force the Jets to look elsewhere at pick 72? If so, I just lost it. What guard or wide receiver will be there at that spot?
Alan, I know that you love me. I miss you, buddy. You're a very sweet person on the Jets Discord. But here's the thing, man. I don't like doing any of that until after Combine, because Combine numbers drastically change the perception of what we know about players. I've seen guys who have a real, okay, perfect example of this one. So 2017, Hassan Reddick was coming out of Temple. He was an he was a defensive end who moved to inside linebacker for the Senior Bowl. He had such a good week at the Senior Bowl, he started garnering late first-round buzz. And then he had an exceptional Combine. And all it took was the right team to select him. He went at pick number 13 to the Arizona Cardinals. That was a guy who saw his draft stock go from being a mid-round 2 selection to a top 15 pick. So it's challenging right now to say Roman Wilson, who had arguably the best Combine of any receiver that was in Mobile, is he going to be available at 72? Because going into Mobile, it's very easy to say 3rd-round pick, likely a slot receiver, somebody that's going to be limited inside, short to intermediate throws. He'll turn upfield, let the Jets start cooking a little bit. Case in point, actually playing for the Jets. But is that going to carry the same weight if he runs a 4.42 at the Combine? Is that going to bolster his stats up? Tez Walker was the saddest story in college football this year. And I stand on my ground with this one. And it's why the NCAA is now dealing with the ramifications with the Tennessee case, because they realize the rules just don't make sense. But Walker was a guy that if you talk to a lot of scouting people, they think that he has the attributes of a first-round talent. Well, does the numbers at the Combine and a mixed showcase at the Senior Bowl, does that eventually allow him maybe to pigeonhole himself up into the 2nd round? Or is he available at pick number 72? So it's really challenging until after the Combine when you get the numbers, you see what the meeting standpoints are to judge a player. Going into Mobile, I thought Roman Wilson was probably a 3rd-round pick. 72 would make a lot of sense if he was made available.
I think Roman Wilson is a great guy for the Jets to target, personally. I mean, just stud out of Michigan. Someone else I like out of Michigan is Blake Corum in the 4th round. Running back, great year. I also like their other running back, Donovan Edwards, who probably goes in the 4th round also.
He's going back to school next year, so he's not even available.
But he would have probably went in the 4th round if he was probably available. So we have 2 4th-round picks this year.
Yep.
The way if I was Joe Douglas, assuming all goes as planned in the draft, I know it's early, but the mock drafts are saying if that kind of goes accordingly, my dream scenario for the Jets to use both 4th-round picks on are Jordan Travis and Blake Corum. I think that would be incredible.
It's not a bad one, Connor. I'll give you that. I understand the running back. You can always have good depth with running back if you feel like that you're missing an element behind a guy in Breece Hall, which it was very evident you were. Yeah, if you want to go ahead and put a 4th-round flyer on a bruiser, bell cow type of guy who is going to be a little battle tested coming into the NFL. I mean, he has over 2,000 carries during his time when he was at Ann Arbor. It's why he's the all-time leader in rushing touchdowns for the Wolverines. But if you feel confident in the role that you have for him, I think that makes a lot of sense. Travis is an outlier for a lot of people. He is probably one of the more polarizing quarterback prospects on day 3. And at day 3, One thing that I've noticed is you start looking at traits. Do you want a guy who is consistent throwing across the middle of the field? What's the touchdown to interception ratio look like? What's his completion percentages look like? Do we care about arm strength and velocity over timing and tempo? What are things that can be corrected? What are things that can't? And Travis, to me, is just missing that certain element to his game that for a college, he'll stand out. He'll be a legend in Tallahassee as long as he lives. He took the Seminoles to an undefeated regular season. Good for him. But it's very challenging to say what you saw will translate to the NFL. A guy who honestly I really like, and I don't think is going to be there after what we saw in Mobile, but I thought Spencer Rattler would be a really nice find for you guys. I think that what he brings in terms of the mobility to evade pressure outside the pocket is really promising. He does have a good arm. He's got a good mechanical arm that is really throwing crisp, tight spirals into small windows. He's making the most of his throws. And I think that that means a lot. But also with the run at quarterback, some teams really value the position as a backup. And maybe he does end up going in the 4th round or even higher. Maybe he goes in the 3rd round. Maybe with a good combine performance, we see a guy like Bo Nix take a step back and a guy like Spencer Rattler take a step forward. So all those things are definitely in play. I don't think that Travis is a bad fit. I do think that quarterback in the 4th round is essential for the Jets. Just get a backup, feel confident if you have to start him for a game or two, hope that Aaron Rodgers stays healthy throughout the entire year. But I really think that if you were to target a quarterback, I would probably lean more Spencer Rattler first than Jordan Travis.
Interesting. I like Jordan Travis. I know he's coming off that injury, but it might take him a little to heal from that injury. But I mean, the flashes he showed before that injury were just crazy. I mean, I think he's a very talented quarterback.
There's a consistency to him that I think is going to sell for a lot of teams. You look at his passer rating, you look at his completion percentage, touchdown to interception ratio. It's promising. I mean, there's a lot to like about him. It's just, I look at the consistency in a guy such as Spencer Rattler, played for Oklahoma. A lot of people are going to say that there's the negative connotation that he was benched for Caleb Williams. I hate to break it to people. Caleb Williams is going to steal the starting job from any college football quarterback not named Jaden Daniels over the last 2 years. He would have easily just gone and taken over any program. So the argument that Rattler isn't good because Williams was there is an outlier. I mean, like here's another one, dude, for you. Avery Johnson's playing at Kansas State this year.
Yes.
And Will Howard left Kansas State where he won a Big 12 title. And everyone says, oh, he's not good. No, it's not that he's not good. It's that Avery Johnson's better. And you're not going to sit a kid in an era where making the college football playoff is pretty more relaxed than ever before with 12 teams. So it doesn't take away from Howard's game. It's more so an assessment of the kid behind him. Same thing with Rattler. Rattler's consistency over the last 2 years, and he already learned how to play in an offense that is more pro style with Dowell Loggins as his offensive coordinator. I think that might translate to the NFL a little sooner than Travis. The injury is very scary. It was a clean break, which is good. That usually means that the timetable for recovery is a set stone. So if they say 6 to 12 months, it's going to be 6 to 12 months. It's not going to be well, let's recap in 3 months and see where we are. Whenever it's a clean break like that, it's good. There just are so many things that worry me about his game. I don't think he has the same accuracy. I mean, I don't think he has the same arm strength as Rattler. I think his tempo and his footwork is a little bit off compared to Rattler. I actually like Michael Pratt out of Tulane a little bit more than Jordan Travis. So that's really where we are with Travis for me, man. I get the love for him. I understand what he did in college is always going to be remembered. But there is a little bit of a drop off for me with Travis. I think that he's more so a 5th, 6th round target than a 4th round target.
Interesting. If we were to go 6th round, I'd like Sam Hartman. If we were going to wait that long for a quarterback, I personally like Sam Hartman. Alan, last Iowa question. This offseason. Your takes on
Alan, I'm holding you to this on Jake's show. I come in on Friday, flying Hawaiian Friday, and I see one Iowa question. You're going to the Shadow Realm forever. I'm making it happen. I'm pushing the button too.
Your takes on Tory Taylor, Eric All, and Logan Lee. Could All and Lee be late round options for the Jets?
Yeah, let's start with the last part. Yeah, they probably could. All's one that I think if he had more time to play this past year and he didn't have the injury concerns, maybe we're talking about him as a 4th or a 5th round pick. Lee, yeah, he's probably in that 6th, 7th round range. I think that he would fit in terms of what you're looking for depth purposes. Tory Taylor. Okay, let's talk about Punt Jesus. Okay, come on. Punt Jesus is amazing. If you think that Thomas Morstead is not your long-term answer, go ahead and add him. Just also be prepared that I thought Braden Mann was going to be the best punter to come out in recent years, and he sucked. And so special teamers are weird, man. It's why you never see them get drafted. Like, it's almost unheralded. Like the Roberto Aguayo pick from a few years ago, it shocked everybody because no one thought that was going to happen after Sebastian Janikowski. Like, everyone's just like, nope, never going to be the case. Okay, second round pick on a kicker. That works. So Taylor, from a punt schematic standpoint, his hang time is phenomenal. His yards per punt return are exceptional. There has not been a more consistent special teams player outside of maybe his teammate Cooper DeJean the last 2 years in college football than Tory Taylor. But again, it's one of those things where what's your situation with Morstead like? Do you think that he's leaving anytime soon? Do you want to cut him? Like, because you don't need two punters on a 53-man roster. And I can tell you this, if you take Taylor and you cut him, he would either have to have the worst, and I mean by far the worst preseason we have ever seen, or he's getting picked up within like 5 minutes of him hitting the waiver claim. Like, he's not lasting. So that comes with the risk, when it comes to a guy like Taylor. Do you like your punter situation for 2 or 3 years down the line? Because a guy like him has all-pro potential, but do you need an all-pro punter? And more importantly, why are you even talking about adding in an all-pro punter? A punter is supposed to be a last type of resort.
I agree. I mean, I personally, if I'm being completely honest, I don't know who all three of those players are. I normally learn about the draft starting once the Jets are eliminated from playoff contention.
And you had time this year. You had more time than ever before.
Yeah.
It's so shocking. Jake and I talk about this all the time where we bring up how this year, whether good, bad, or indifferent, the Jets were still meaningful at some capacity going into December. Like, when was the last time you could say that about the New York Jets?
Last year.
Oh, yeah, my bad. 2 years ago. Two years ago, they were good.
No, oh yeah. Well, counting 2 years ago, they were playing meaningful games in early January, which is unusual for the Jets. NY Jets superfan. Cole, other than Bowers, I don't hear much about the tight ends. Is there someone you like we can grab in the 4th round? I saw someone the other day. I don't remember his name though.
Let me pull up my rankings real fast. This one's tight end is weird because then you said 4th round, so now I got to go pull up the rankings from where I think the guys are. Because like you said Brock Bowers, that's going to be a top 10 pick, top 15 pick. Jatavion Sanders out of Texas is probably going to fall somewhere in the top 50. Really good route runner, physical blocker, good inline player on 3rd down to move the chains. I don't know who I'd compare it to. Maybe Noah Fant for the Seattle Seahawks. I think that he'd be a good tight end 1. He'd be a great tight end 2. AJ Barner is probably next on that list, and Theo Johnson from Penn State probably falls in that category as well. Johnson's 6'6". He gives you good size. He gives you some vertical presence. He was a decent pass catcher this past year for the Nittany Lions. He was overall what you were kind of looking for in a solidified tight end. The question is, are you looking for a starter or are you looking for depth purposes? Because with depth, I think that in the 4th round, you maybe don't want to target one for depth-wise. Maybe look to say, I don't know, round 6, round 5. And at that point, we're talking maybe Ben Sinnott out of Kansas State, Jaheim Bell from Florida State. That's a Swiss Army knife player. He can line up really anywhere for you. This past season, he played a little H-back. He played some fullback. He played some Y-back. He lined up as an inline tight end. He played wide receiver a little bit. At South Carolina, he was a running back in a little bit. So you can utilize him in a variety of ways. But the question is, 4th round, maybe AJ Barner from Michigan would be a decent pick. Theo Johnson from Penn State. If he falls to you, Cade Stover, I get there's kind of a little bit of recency bias with Ohio State tight ends and Jet fans because of the Jeremy Ruckert fiasco that's been going on the last 2 years. But I think Stover's a better inline blocker than we give him credit for. I think he's a decent red zone threat. Kind of like the same things we said about Jeremy Ruckert 2 years ago. So buyer's remorse. There's tight ends. I just feel like when you look at the anomaly that is Brock Bowers, that's why you're not hearing about the other names. It's Brock, and then there's a significant drop-off, and then there's a giant cliff to where if you keep climbing down it, maybe you'll hit the Grand King, and then you keep falling a little bit more, and you hit the center of the earth. And then there's Jatavion Sanders. Like, that's the drop-off in terms of talent between the two.
Interesting. I mean, other than Bowers, there were really no big name tight ends in this class, and I mean, rightfully so. Not a lot of tight ends like ever really go in the first round if you think about it.
You
So
gotta
I
be
mean,
special. You gotta be
yeah,
special to be a tight end to go first round.
I agree. But I think O line and wide receiver is like are the only answers at 10 for the Jets.
I think at 10, those are the only answers. If you were to trade down into, say, the 20s, recoup like a first round pick and a second round pick, like say you get a 2025 first round pick and you get a second round pick in 2024,
Jackson Powers Johnson
that's
all
where my
day.
brain is probably going right now. Jackson Powers Johnson, the Oregon kid.
Mhm.
That was arguably the second biggest winner of all the offensive linemen that were in Mobile this past week. Tyler Guyton went from being probably a mid-second rounder to top 20 selection. But Powers Johnson, the validity of what a center can provide for your team, the IQ, the net worth, the ability to be a solid run defender, to be able to understand baseline defensive fronts, call audibles from the jump, be able to connect with your quarterback on an elite level. I mean, part of the reason why Aaron Rodgers had such success was what Corey Lindsey provided. So maybe that's the same way of your thinking. Do you want to keep Tippmann at guard instead of moving him into center? That's really where the conversation, because and I have this problem with a lot of people when they talk about Powers Johnson. Well, we can just have a quarterback, we can have a competition. One of them can, whoever loses ends up going to guard. Powers Johnson is a center. He's a center. Like he is a straight center. You don't take a Pro Bowl caliber wide receiver and move him inside a tight end and say, "Hey, figure it out." No, you say,
Yeah.
"We're going to utilize you at your best advantage." Powers Johnson's best advantage is playing center. He was elite last year in the Pac-12. Oregon was one of the best offenses in all of college football, and in large part it was due to their offensive line. He's a guy who, if you target in the 20s, would make sense, but you're also going in with the fact of knowing he is playing center. Besides that, if you were to trade down to say 15, I still think that you're targeting a wide receiver. I still think you're targeting an offensive tackle. If you were to trade up, you're going for an offensive tackle. In fact, I would say you're going for Joe Alt. That would be like that's it. That's the baseline. If you're trading up, you're getting Joe Alt. And then if you say at 10, I think that offensive tackle is probably the number one source right now. Not going to count out wide receiver. Rome Odunze is really interesting to me. Like, I don't disagree with you on Neighbors with the size thing, but it's for different purposes. You look at a guy like Garrett Wilson, who's 6'1". Do you really want another 6-foot wide receiver when you can get a 6'3" guy in Rome Odunze? Maybe that pairs well. Odunze this past year was phenomenal. He was one of, if not the best receivers in yards after the catch. He was the number one receiver in the Pac-12. 9 100 receiving yard games this past year. Like, he was damn good at every capacity. So he can be a vertical threat. He can work the intermediate part of the field. I think he'd be a nice complement opposite of Garrett Wilson. It gives you optimism if that's the pick. And it doesn't take you out of the running to get an offensive tackle. But what I will say is the level of drop off between starters and depth pieces are going to be a little different when it comes to talking about wide receivers and offensive tackles. The tackle class is really, really high. So Fuanga being there, you look at Fugana out of Washington, who's an exterior offensive lineman, can play both. Powers Johnson, you throw Tyler Guyton in the mix. Jordan Morgan from Arizona is another one.
Amarius
Those are guys
Mims.
that those are guys that you can see start immediately, where maybe in the third round when you're at pick number 72, that starter's not there, but a wide receiver that maybe isn't starting week 1 could eventually end up cracking the starting lineup by week 6.
Interesting. So there's different like if we were to trade back to fifth let's say I'm making it up. We were to trade back to pick number 18.
Okay.
Given Fuanga being off the board, probably knowing I think Fuanga would be off the board by pick 18.
I think at this point he's gone.
Yeah.
From what I gathered, this was a kid that had gained top 25 interest going into Mobile. He left Mobile with top 15. And
Yeah.
so if he has a good combine, we're now talking top 10.
Yeah, I think he's off. So we're sitting at that 18th pick. A few guys. If we were to go wide, okay, staying at 18, I think Amarius Mims would be a solid option. And another guy, I don't want to butcher his last name, but Kingsley S. out of BYU, I think is someone to target if we were in that 18 to 21 kind of range.
Kingsley, I like your thought process, Connor. If you can get a second round pick and select him, do it. If you gotta take him at 18, I would I would be very, very, very optimistic. I would be very cautiously optimistic on that one. Like on the thinnest of ice that I'm allowed to walk on at 18 for a guy like Kingsley. That's a little bit different. If you're looking at offensive linemen, JC Latham out of Alabama maybe is in play there. I know. Here's the thing, man. I hate seeing him mocked inside the top 10.
I hate seeing.
I'm okay with it in the 18 to 22 range. So,
yeah.
the
maybe.
question is for me, do you feel comfortable starting a guy like Amarius Mims, who has 1 full year of experience at starter at right tackle, moving forward, when you can get Latham, who has 3 years of starting experience in the SEC on the offensive line and is a plug and play right tackle right here and right now? Or do you want to go with a guy like maybe Troy Fugama out of Washington, who can play interior offensive line? He reminds me a little bit of AVT. Maybe you have that battle where the loser moves inside, the winner goes outside the right tackle. That feels more like the realm. Tyler Guyton is a name that I think you have to start monitoring at this point. He was a really good left tackle this past year. Kind of follows the same emulation of what you have with Anton Harrison coming out last season for Jacksonville. Good overall in pass pro, decent footwork. He made himself some money this past weekend at Mobile. That feels more so in the line of what you're looking at 18, probably.
All right. So let's say if we were going to trade back to 20, like 27 to 30.
You want to trade all the way back with Arizona. Okay. So Arizona. So you're getting, let's just go with this. If you're trading from 10 to 27, you're getting a haul. You're getting a massive haul. So already you should feel good about what you're going to bring in for future draft capital.
If we were to, as far as 27 and we were to go wide receiver, Keon Coleman, I'm taking if we were to go wide receiver in the like late first round.
I don't know if he's there. That's the only thing. You know, that's going to be interesting. His combine numbers are going to carry a lot of weight. That's a 6'4" wide receiver that proved on multiple occasions this past year. You need a guy in the end zone. I mean, inside the 20. That's who you target. Number 4 was number 1 for a reason down in Tallahassee. I think Adonai Mitchell from Texas would be a name that maybe you want to monitor. This is a really good route runner, physical at the point of attack, 6'2" size, smooth hands, smooth like butter. Has experience playing in both the SEC and the Big 12. He was dominant this past year as a number 2 opposite of Xavier Worthy at Texas. He basically has been one of the college football playoff legends. He's caught a touchdown pass in every playoff game he's been in. So maybe that's where you look. Troy Franklin from... Excuse me, one sec. Oh, sorry. Hang on. Okay. Yeah, it's okay. I think it's gone. Troy Franklin is a vertical threat that I remember. Okay, so remember a few years ago when there was the argument for Jameson Williams at pick number 10, and everyone was like, kind of, that maybe is where your do-over for Jameson Williams is. Troy Franklin finished with over 1,300 receiving yards this past year. He led the Pac-12 in reception touchdowns. Number 3 in receptions, 91 total. Last season, he averaged around like 14.8 yards. This past year, he led all the Pac-12 in yards after catch with 19.7. So maybe if that's where you want to add in that vertical speed threat, and he is speed, and speed kills, maybe that's where you target him. I could see that. I think Xavier Worthy from Texas is probably going to be in play for the Jets if they were to be at 27. Like, that's the range you're looking at. Coleman's a really intriguing prospect because of every person thinks of him like a snowflake. They all have differing opinions. Some people will say he's a bona fide top 3 receiver in the class. Others will say he's more so 7 or 8. I lean right around that 5-6 range. 5-6 range puts him somewhere in the late teens, early 20s. If he were to fall to 27, totally understand the move, get a big red zone target, be a more consistent playmaker than Allen Lazard. But it does feel like he maybe is going to be selected a few picks before, which is where your attention turns to the next crop of guys, the Adonai Mitchells, the Xavier Worthies, the Troy Franklins of the world. If you wanted to go maybe a little deeper, could be a receiver that I could see. Let's see, wide receiver, pull up my big board. See, Loud McConkey, I just don't see happening at that point. Brian Thomas Jr. from LSU is another big time name. 6'3" wide receiver, finished with over 1,000 yards this past year, 14 touchdowns. I could see that being something, but that's more so the range you're looking at. Not Keon feels a little too rich for 27.
Interesting. Going back to your JC Latham analysis, how you wouldn't bother seeing him be drafted in that later type of round. We had JC Latham on the Jets. His name is Mekhi Becton, a 360-pound tackle who has horrible knees, and for the first time since he's been in the NFL, stayed healthy for a full season. So that's why I stay away from Latham.
Listen, dude, I'm not gonna argue with you on the Latham thing. I totally get it. And for a GM like Joe Douglas, who cannot be burned by any picks and has to have a monumental year, you need to go safe. I mean, and here's the thing that people get so mad at me for when I say this: safe keeps you employed. Safe keeps you employed. Like you keep your job if you sometimes play safe. I'm not saying don't go for the risk every once in a blue moon, but in a year where regardless of what happens with Aaron Rodgers, if you're not in the playoffs, you are out of a job. You can't go for liabilities. And I do think that there are some limitations to a guy like Latham's game. I ultimately think that by his fourth or fifth season, he's probably going to be shifted inside to guard. So I understand not targeting him if you are a Jets because you've already been burnt that way. But there is going to be conversations of him falling somewhere in that range. Let another team fall for it, though. I completely get what you're saying, though.
I agree. Cole, thank you for joining us. Any final thoughts?
The Jets are in a really good spot. One thing that I will say that I think sometimes people don't understand is just because you trade down or just because you make a pick that you didn't really like does not mean it comes back not to bite you. Doesn't come back to recoup the benefits later on. And so right now where the Jets are, you have the quarterback for next year. You have an all-pro wide receiver. You have an elite defense. You have pieces in play that are going to keep you, I would say, maybe not front runners in the AFC, but definitely contenders to make the playoffs. Whatever Joe Douglas does, if the pick is right, don't complain. So if he thinks the best plan is to move down and gain a third round pick, maybe he's looking at packaging something to get up into the second round to make a selection of a difference maker. And then there you go. You add in both the premier left tackle and the premier wide receiver, or a very complimentary number 2 receiver. If he stays put at 10, that doesn't mean they aren't making moves behind the scenes to where maybe they're going to move up. That doesn't mean they're not making moves that are going to hopefully fortify this roster. New York is in a really intriguing spot because they are picking number 10, but imagine what this roster would look like with Aaron Rodgers and they were picking at number 10. The optimism would be pretty low. But because if you didn't have Aaron Rodgers outside of 4 snaps and you still are picking at 10, to me, that gives you intrigue and optimism to where whatever Douglas wants to do, he can do it, and nobody should really complain.
I agree. Cole, thank you for joining us. Thank you guys for watching, and as always, JETS, 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 Jets.